Hello everyone and welcome to yet another live coding and chill. I'm your host Johnny, delighted to be here. Hope you've had amazing weeks and you're coming up to an amazing weekend. Today we are doing stream number 123, which is a fun number, and most of those have been web dev. I guess most of those have been front end. We have been doing some game dev in the past couple of weeks, but we're back to web development. We're back to Svelte. Although actually we're gonna be doing HTML fundamentals today. We'll be doing vanilla HTML popovers, which is maybe the most exciting drop new API, web dev API of the year. What are popovers? I'll go through it real quick because you see them everywhere. I'm going through this navigation bar in the MDM docs, in the language dropdown as well. These can be considered as popovers. And the thing is that this used to be very hard to do. You needed a lot of code to do this, but we're going to show how you can do it in 2 lines of code nowadays. There are tons of libraries dedicated to having awesome popovers for you, and we'll discuss their pros and cons still. But now we have a vanilla HTML way, 2 properties we can add to just any component pretty much, and then you have a popover. The classic use case for popovers, the one I like the most, is for this, for drop-down menus, like menus that go into menus, because you do want the user to be able to click as little as possible, but also there is only so much information that you can present in a single page. So maybe the user needs to tap and tap again to get into here, but at least you're not going into big list view, then they have to read and then they have to decide where to go next. You can go straight into the HTML method here. But sadly, the most popular way to see popovers nowadays, the thing that you'll most likely be asked to do is have a popover or dialog really. So when you go at the end of a blog post or any website really, and you'll be asked before you leave us your email address and you get 20% off or something like that. So sadly, this very capitalistic use case is the one you'd see the most and not the one that I like. We're gonna talk about both of them, but like the game dev streams, we'll actually be coding a lot today. So let's get right to it. So let's say that eventually what we'll be doing here is that we want the user to click the demos tag here, the demos element, the demos link here, or hover over it if they're not on a mobile device, and see all the possible demos that we have. So we want to save one big transition and one big click for them. Instead of going to the demos page and then going to the popover page, we want immediately for them to see all the demos we have available, or maybe the most popular ones or the latest ones, and then you can still go into this index page and see all of them. But we have limited space. We can't show every demo in the world in the header. In fact, if we go even further to like the mobile breakpoint, we have this side nav thing, which counts as a model because the user is supposed to interact with something here or dismiss it and then move on with the page. You shouldn't be able to interact with other parts of the website while you're here. So that's one of the differences between models and popovers. But in any case, let's say that we are in this breakpoint. We don't want to add, we don't have the space to add all of these possible demos here. We want a drop down to happen. But just to see how theoretically easy it is, or relatively easy it is to make a popover nowadays, no JavaScript, no nothing. In here, we'll have a div element, can be any element. So can be a div, can be a span, can be a section, can be whatever you want. And if we add boring popover, let's say if we add the new popover attribute, which should work like this, but my linter is saying that I should actually give this a value, which could be this. It does default to auto, so even if you say nothing, this is what it's gonna count like. So sometimes the linters don't get things correct. It's a few months old and supported by every browser nowadays, so feel free to use it. But your linting tools may tell you something bad. So the moment we add the popover attribute, you'll see on the left that this gets hidden. You cannot see this anymore. And Chrome crash of all things. Sometimes it happens. So we've talked about this. We are showing the one line of code. We need one more. Maybe you got it already. But full screen, please. Get in there. Get in there. Right. So this can be any element we say here. Let's give it a bit of a bigger text. Doesn't cross again. The moment we give it the popover class, it disappears. This defaults to popover auto, and what it does is really say, put this element into a different stacking context, different rendering, and it should start as hidden. The way to toggle it on is to have a button or input element So this, the popover itself, can be any element, but it can only be toggled by either a button or an input. So either button or input here. It's not anything goes. With a popover target. And this needs an ID. So we do need to give an ID to this element. We can call it popover boring or something. And then say that the popover target is this. And the moment this happens, it's the browser that is going to be doing the magic to actually toggle it in and out. So that's it. Well, it is in the popover auto state. It means that it will automatically, when it's not showing, it will start showing it. If it's showing, then it will toggle it off. But also, because this is in the auto state as well, it will be dismissed when you click outside of it. So the moment I click outside of the popover element, it gets dismissed. If I click inside, I can have buttons here, I can have anything. And if I interact with it here, it's all fine. But if I click outside, it automatically gets dismissed, which is the usual behavior that you want. Even if this was an ad, like subscribe to my newsletter or whatever, this is what people usually want. Put it in the middle of the screen, hard to miss. But if people press escape, for example, if people click outside, you can dismiss it. If your project manager or your client is particularly evil, they may say, set a timer, so in the first 5 seconds, they cannot even dismiss it. But that's horrible, and I would fight against that implementation. But here it is, like 2 lines of code. You have a button with a popover target to the ID of your popover, and I guess you need an ID for the popover itself, which is something that you could have done 20 years ago with HTML, and the popover attribute. So popover attribute here, popover target, the 2 new things, the 2 new lines of code that you need, and here you go, popovers. We will get a bit more complicated with this as the stream goes on, but it should be a quick stream. In any case, we can style this in various ways, including with Tailwind. As you can see, but you may notice that positioning this may be hard. So even if I give it like a position absolute on top 0, it will still render in the middle. So as the stream goes on, we'll see what we can do to actually fulfill the thing you need, where we have this header here, we click demos, and then we want a list of all the available demos. Since we cannot position this easily, as you may have expected, this will be a bit trickier, but we'll do it. So this is the quick demo. Why are we doing this anyway? Let's talk about it. So popovers are a fundamental thing that you want the websites, at least that clients and PMs want. As I said, subscribe to my newsletter, like lead generation like that, and urgency messaging. If we detect that you're about to leave, then we show up and say only 3 tickets remaining. All of those things, people always want them. Product owners always want them. And even the usability stuff, like having a drop-down demo like MDN does, is a nice accessibility usability feature. But we didn't have an easy way to do this in HTML. We need to use JavaScript to calculate, this is the position it should be above this, like complicated ways to affect the CSS after you've interacted with an element, maybe very complicated CSS selectors that wouldn't be great, because do you really want to like dismiss as you're going out? So you could say, well, this is covered or this is covered, keep showing this element, but maybe you want this to stay open as you go outside. So you would probably need to write quite a lot of JavaScript for this. And because there is such a need for something like this, there are tons and tons of libraries that implement this for you. Trying to take care of all the accessibility concerns that you may have. We have used Shadcn in the past and we'll use it again for this. So you have this popover here, it doesn't dismiss when I go outside. It can open right down, but you can affect the direction here. Shadcn is based on Bits UI, BITS UI by Handabyte. It's always Handabyte. That is doing most of the work, it seems, in these issues. But Shadcn for React is based on something else behind the scenes. In any case, the code for all of this, even when to use it, it's like you need a popover root, then here's your trigger, then your content, and do you want like a narrow, a close button? Like what do you want? Maybe you don't want all of these things. Shadcn is a copy and paste library, so you can use their tooling to bring in components. And in this case, Svelte components that look like this. So you need to bring in like 5 components that aren't like super complicated, but they are pretty complicated. And the less code you have, the usually better it is. Less stuff to maintain, less things to worry about. If something is an HTML standard, it's much more likely that it behaves in a very sane for accessibility concerns way across all browsers. Maybe it won't look the same, but as far as accessibility is concerned, it's going to be very, very usable. And less code, like follow the standards, also means that regardless if you're working in a Svelte project now, or a React project, or a project that has Shadcn, or a project that doesn't have Shadcn and has like Material UI or whatever, you don't care. You don't need to care about any of those things because the vanilla native HTML way that's dropped is gonna work across any framework. So I am using Svelte for this, but it's mostly for demo purposes. I am using real apps. I'm showcasing real apps that we're building here in the live streams. And I like Svelte. One of the reasons that I love Svelte actually is because the templating looks like vanilla HTML. You do have components like React style or JSX style, but a lot of the components that we have just have regular looking HTML. This gets compiled or transpiled, but that doesn't really matter. What you need to know as you're writing Svelte is just HTML fundamentals. So I can show something like this, like the popover, and it is something that you can copy paste into an index HTML without a transpilation step, and it will just work. So that's why I'm using it in Svelte. But the reason I'm showing the Popover API is because you can work with it in any library of your choice or no library at all. And yeah, usually less code, the better. You can bring in a library, but what if the project you're working on doesn't have that particular library? You need to learn how to use another library. Maybe that one doesn't have a popover. Maybe you need to bring something else. Maybe they are like conflicting libraries. Lots of concerns here. So instead of what it used to be, which is, do I really need to write all of this code myself and figure it out? Why not learn the two little attributes that you need to add, and then feature complete, it's done, it works. That's why we're learning this today. And now that I've talked about why you should learn this, let's try to make things a bit more complicated here. Cover a few more use cases. Right, so we have the boring popover here. This is add style popover. Doesn't do much, appears in the middle of the screen, and that's it. If you look into the popover specification, you will learn more on where it gets rendered. It gets put in the top layer, which is not where the rest of your app is, which is why it's not affected by the parent positions and overflows and all of that. But it's also why it can be hard to actually position it where exactly you want. So we will be trying to do that in a bit. But for now, let's just create a popover component that we can use. Let's say that in our components directory. So in UI, I have everything that's Shadcn. And therefore, my own custom components I will just put in here. And I will say that I want my popover to just be a div. I do want to have a script tag because we are using Svelte here. And it's Svelte 5, so instead of all the crazy things that GitHub Copilot wants me to do, what I actually want is to destructure the props. And these props I can type as HTML attributes for an HTML div element. Get all of those and spread them in the div. Again, popovers don't need to be div elements. They can be anything you want, but div is like a nice common one. Why not use that one? But actually, because it's Svelte 5, this is gonna need to take some props that are gonna be the HTML attributes that we said, but they have an extra thing. They also get by default children, which is a Svelte snippet, which we're gonna render here, so long as we remember to destructure it. And even for the boring middle popover, let's say another one. Let's say Svelte component. Popover. We can render our popover here. Copilot is not helping, but maybe it will. Nope. I'll help myself then. These popovers are usable Svelte components. So if you want consistency with your popovers, this is a way to do it. And let's put these in Shadcn as well. And maybe all of these are sections, and these are just divs actually. Just to style things, can't help myself with styling. So this popover is a reusable Svelte component, and I guess we can structure the popover attribute if we really want to, and default it to auto, and pass it along here. And then this disappears immediately, which means that we need a button again. Which will need a popover target. The ID could be anything. But because this is getting any prop that a div can, we can just pass popover svelte here. And now, if we click, we'll see our reusable svelte component, which is slightly different, and we can actually style it, which is the point when trying to extract into a component like this. So maybe we can destructure the class as well as class name, and pass using CLCX helper, the class names helper. Give it a class name, and also give it text LT, for example, and py8. More padding. Less. Around it. Give it a border. Looks kind of neat. And anything else you might want. You can overcomplicate this. You can expect like a title for your popover, and then you have like a little heading here. You can have the dismiss X thingy that also dismisses it. That could be fun to do. This gets given the ID, so it can pass it into its own dismiss cross arrow if we want. Maybe we want to do that, actually. Put an X here. I don't know, let me know in the chat if you want me to put an X on the top right. And of course, we can style this button as we'd like. So we can have this be our own button. That's like a styled Shadcn button. Click it, works the same. This can be anything you'd like. Cool. Looks pretty good. And I guess what we'll want to do next is make it work with our demos thingy. What else should we do here? Maybe a bit of styling. We did add the button because that wouldn't have worked. And I'll recap again. Other popover modes. So what do we get for free? Let's put a little timestamp here. as I do this little recap. So with a Popover API and just a Popover target and a Popover that you don't even need to set to auto because it defaults to auto, what you get is the automatic showing of a Popover regardless of what other elements you have on the page. It's rendered into a different layer, a layer dedicated to Popovers and models. And you also get its dismissal by clicking outside of the Popover itself. So if I click inside, it stays. If I click outside, it disappears. If I escape, if I press escape, or similar buttons in various devices, like the cancel buttons, it will also dismiss the Popover. And all you need is like these 2 lines of code, really. So we get all of the classic things that we want with Popovers, especially the ones that are made for like marketing, subscribe to my newsletter type of Popovers for free without needing to do anything. When we do our dropdown here, we will need to do a bit more work because in that case, you wouldn't want it to render at the middle of the page, which is easy to do. It's the default here with Popovers. You would probably want the other demos to show when you are right before this, so like a drop-down menu, I guess. So you wouldn't get this for free. You're getting the ad style Popover for free. And let's talk about the other Popover modes. The one we've used is the automatic one. And there are a few more. There is the manual one, which will not hide the Popovers if you click outside. So let's do another section here. So this one, let's call it Popover manual. This one will only be able to dismiss programmatically or with a button. So this one, if I press here and press outside, well, if I actually give it the Popover manual, if I click here and press outside, you can notice, like, you have to trust me that I am pressing outside here. It's not dismissed. I'm pressing escape. Maybe you can hear the button, and it's not getting dismissed. To dismiss it, you need to press the button to dismiss it. And because the default for a button that has a Popover target is to toggle, then you don't need 2 buttons, one to show and one to dismiss. You can also dismiss it programmatically by accessing this element and calling its hide, I think, method. So Popover, I guess that toggles it. Here you go. But that's it. So it will stay until the user explicitly interacts with something, which can include clicking this the button that triggered it. You wouldn't usually want this, but there are cases where you would. The difference with models is that the user can interact with the rest of the page here, which makes it weird, makes the thing that you need explicit dismissal weird for me. But maybe you can mix it with some CSS where you blur the background or whatever. But at that point, like, really, you have a model, you don't have a Popover. Maybe that's just splitting hairs. But hey, so that's the manual mode. This is not the default. If you just put Popover, you will enter in the auto mode, which will listen for things that usually mean escape. And for the Popover target, you can combo it with popover target action. So by default it's the toggle, but you can have dedicated show and hide popover buttons here. This one will show and hide it, but let's look up more. Let's say show manual popover and hide manual popover. Popover target action, the new one we have here. Let's say this is the hide one. Let's say this is the show one. So pressing the hide one does nothing when it's hidden. Pressing the show one shows it, and if you keep pressing it, it will not dismiss it. But then it's the hide one that will actually dismiss it. And toggle just gets it from any state to the other state. And these are the interesting compos and pretty much what you'd need for today, besides the more complicated styling that we'll have a look at momentarily. Right, I see that this is that next step will be to bring in Shadcn Popover. But let's try to style it. Let's say that we try to make our header do what we want. Let's say that this, you actually click, and then you get a drop down of the possible popovers that you have. So let's see how that would look. Maybe it's fun. Maybe it's gonna be fun. So this is not gonna be a button with an href actually. It's gonna be a button with, let's make it a subcomponent, demos list. Let's bring in the button. Let's use it. Still here. Let's bring in all of these guys that we have in the demo space. So another ordered list. So this thing. But you know what? We can say that actually all of this is inside our popover. Which immediately hides it. And if we give this an ID of popover demo links, doesn't need to have popover every time, but just to ensure that it's unique. And then this demos thing, instead of being a button with an href, it is going to be a button with a popover targets of popover demo links. So when I click it, it is showing a popover of all of these things. Great. But I don't want it to be in the middle of the screen. I want it to be right below it. So how do I style it? And that's kind of tricky. We can give this a class. Like popover, I guess. Or not. This has an ID. So we can style this here. We can say that popover demo links hitting the global namespace, so not local styles here. We'd want it to have a position absolute and a top of 0 for now. But you'll notice that this does nothing because by default popovers, besides being rendered on a pretty much dedicated layer for that sort of thing, they also have some default styles. And in order for this to be affected by attributes such as position absolute and top 0, we need to set its inset, I think, into unset, if you can believe that. So if we do this, then it will actually respect that we want to have a position absolute at top 0. So that's the interesting thing about this. In the header, do I have like somewhere to tell me how tall the header is? My CSS. Not really. There are places where I actually calculate the header height. But anyway, like a quick way to actually do this would be to eyeball it. And we could be doing like some better calculations for this. But let's just eyeball it. So let's say like 1 rem, where does that get us? About here. So let's say that 4 rem is what we want. Here, the height of the header, which we could get in a different way, but we won't. And then from the right, it's gonna be like rem, let's say 14 rem. Too much. The other way. All right, and looks kind of fine because I do know that these will have the same width. Like this section is going to be at the end of the website in any case, so it should look fine. And you can eyeball like a quick popover like this, maybe 75. You can slightly complicate things and actually calculate the position of this demos element and make sure that the top and right is exactly how much the offset for this element is. You can get a reference to this button and use that to inline style perhaps something about the top and the right of your popover, but in most cases you can just eyeball it and there you go. You have like your language toggle, language switcher, language speaker, you have your extra links in there, and it's good. Life's good. And life is good. Now, if we want to animate this, there is also the concept of popover open. The pseudo class here, which maybe we can transition the opacity to 1 or something. So maybe opacity starts at 0, and then we can this should repeat this, no? Right, I'll make this a bit less crazy. There is a pseudo class that will be used only when this is open, or when your popover is in the open state, which does mean that we could apply like our transitions here, I guess. Maybe. Didn't save this. Let's give like a transitions class here. Whoops. No, it should be fine with the opacity 1. Is popover open, or is it popover something else? Let's have a look. Yeah, it is popover open. Like this, maybe. Maybe not. It is reading this, it's not reading the opacity 1. For some reason. Instance is the one that we want to talk about. It takes it out of this magical thing that always puts it in the center. But why is this opacity 1 not respected? I think I did have it in here, didn't I? Maybe I need a different example. And I think I have like an appear animation somewhere. Guess I don't. Not appear in this project. So yeah, this opacity thing is throwing me off. Let's see what examples these guys have. Have the blur background, which we can show as well. Let's see if that's gonna work. Because one of the other ones that we can use is the backdrop pseudo element. So this, besides this popover, let's just not do this for now. Besides this popover, the popover also produces one pseudo element, like the before and after, the backdrop one, which we can choose to have like a background color. Let's say black. Let's see what happens. So if you want the user to not really interact with the rest of the page or keep focus to the element that just opened, you can style the pseudo element, the backdrop pseudo element, and everything behind this popover will be hidden behind this. So if you give it like, if you give this like some opacity, then you can kind of see through. You can also use a backdrop filter. What is this? To blur things a bit. It should work. Maybe full opacity. So there you go. And there are ways to animate the backdrop filter as well. But there we're getting into the kind of complicated territory. Can we apply a few ones? More than one? We'll find out. We will learn on the fly. Looks like we can. Great. Yeah, and there is like, I think, a hack, not an official way to do this, to transition to having the filter on, because you can't animate its opacity as far as I know. But yeah, if for some reason you want your popover to have to take the focus of the user, then you can do this even though popovers are supposed to not stop the user from interacting with the rest of the page. If you want the user to take action with the popover specifically, you should be using a models. But the models API and the dialog API, I think, is worse than the popover, so I won't blame you for using this for that result. Right, so we have this little example. Let's move it kinda in our examples page. Kinda quickly. Popover. Just the one button. And let's hit popover backdrop and apply backdrop filter, blur, and sepia. So now when we open this, backdrop, blur, and desaturate the rest of the app. There you go. And for fun, on this one, we can give like an, maybe for all of them, maybe for all of the popovers, we can give them an MX2. So they are not like flush at the end of the screen. MX4 too much? Nice. interesting. They have MX Auto by default and doing this messes it up. So I won't do it here for now. I'll do it for the long one. Hello, not getting mad. How are you doing? Right, so we have this cool popover that blurs the rest of the website and desaturates it, makes it more sepia, really telling the user you should subscribe to our newsletter or other ad purposes. Not getting mad says you're doing good. I'm doing great as well. Thank you for asking. So yeah, we've built this popover. We've shown a few ways where we can use this quite simple API, just 2 attributes to worry about. I think we're around the 30-minute mark here. Let's see what Shadcn has to say about this. Let's use a Shadcn popover. And this one's toggle the Shadcn popover. But first we need to bring it in because I don't have it in this app. And we can go to Shadcn. Say here's how we can bring this in. Bring it in with PNPM, which is what we're using in this app. Actually, we are in the correct directory. And the popover component, let's see what it's going to bring. Oh, I have a popover. Let's see. I guess it's used for like the calendar picker. So we have a popover. We had a popover all along. This guy. And it's essentially re-exporting everything from Bits UI. And having a custom Svelte component with some specific classes, I suppose, here. Cool, let's turn it into a Svelte 5 component, because that's a bit of work. Yes, so as I often mention, I like showing things in Svelte because it looks like HTML, so you can put it into anything that can read HTML. Maybe a bit more work if you're working with React and you need to transition into stuff into JSX. So for example, in JSX, is it popovertarget? Like camel case? Probably not, because it doesn't have a dash. But anyway, with Svelte, you can just copy paste it into an index.html, and with no translation step, it will just work. But now we did create a Svelte 5 component ourselves that just takes like a typed children prop for the text that we want to have inside the popover, and has some common classes, so they look consistent throughout our app, but everything else is just that anything that the div can take. And now this popover Shadcn component that I apparently already had and forgot, let's transition it into a Svelte 5 component. Svelte 5 is not stable yet, so the Shadcn Svelte library is still using Svelte 4, which is fine. But if you want to transition things into Svelte 5 earlier, you'll need to do the work. However, it's going to be easy for this one because it's not doing anything too crazy, I think. So let's say that our props are this, and then let's say that class name blah blah blah, and the rest props are going to be this. But we also need all of these guys. Transition config align inside offset. So let's get these things in. and they get them out because they want to default to something. So class name can be anything. Great, no worries. Transition should be flying scale. Let's copy it like this. Transition should be flying scale. Done. 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 Transition config should be this. Align should be center. This should be 4. Class name we already got. Great. So we have this. So question is, do props work the same in Svelte and as in React? Yeah, especially with the Svelte 5, they look very much the same. So let's look on our demos. We have this popover component that we've defined to say it takes any attribute that vanilla HTML div elements can take, plus children. So this is a magic Svelte thing, but it's the same as children in React now. This didn't exist in Svelte 4, exists in 5, and children are anything you put in between the tag. So this is the popover component. We can give it a class because div components can get a class attribute. We can give it IDs. We can give it the popover attribute that we're talking about today. We can give it anything that a div can, but we can also put content into it like so. And this will get translated into the children prop on the component side. So the difference is that in React, you just do, I suppose, you get the children out the same from the props. And I guess I should call this rest props for consistency. You destructure, you get the children out from the props, but you would render them just like this. In Svelte 5, you use this magic at render hint that calls the children method. That's what they decided. But that's the big difference, I suppose. But conceptually, they're pretty much the same. Right, so for this one, we have the popover, and how do we use it? Is that we bring in the popover, all the popover stuff from here, from Shadcn. So maybe, let's call it Shadcn popover. And then here, instead of having a button and whatever, too much. It's going to be the Shadcn popover. Toggle Shadcn popover. The default. So we can see that this trigger doesn't look like a button to start with, and then renders this nice card right underneath. Let's see if it has any cool things. It doesn't particularly say anything, but if we look over at the primitive API reference in Bits UI, it will tell us that we can say prevent scroll outside, whether we want it to close or not, on escape, all of those things. Keep track of whether it opens or not, of portals, of everything. But I was wondering, can you affect the direction? There's like lots of things here. In the trigger, you affect the element, I suppose. Sure. We can make this, we can put a button inside here, I suppose. What happens on a transition? Great. Easier to do transitions than like this. Whether we want it to open on the right or on the left. So Now it seems like it opens down, so not sure about that. And it's the x-axis. Whether to avoid collisions if you have many. Whether it's overlap. I thought that there'd be like a top, bottom, right, left, but I assume it's a combination of these things. Oh, can have an arrow. Let's see that. Does it have an arrow? Maybe not. Guess they don't. Does it have the close? Yes, so they are exporting this. But I can't actually see it. Interesting. So they are re-exporting this. They're not re-exporting the arrow, which is interesting. I wonder if something fails here. In the content. Did we put it in the content? We should have had. So, of course, still can't see it. Oh well, let's look at the arrow. Nothing. All lies. Does this still work? Yeah, it seems to work, but not that well. So they do say put these things in here and it will just work. Guess not. Oh well, maybe the colors make it not visible. Let's have a look. Try it one more time. Nope. Interesting. Oh well. It does achieve the effect that you usually want, in that it can easily position it right below the thing that you want. Which would make this thing that we were making a bit easier. More code, I'm sure, goes into making that happen. And it has a nice animation by default instead of having to custom make our own thing. Lots of things, like what's gonna happen when it collides with other popovers, other elements, whether to align it, like what's gonna happen. It looks like that. So this says has a placement thing. Start, center, end. Default, nothing. Let's see. Not placement either. Let's see what happens if we give it something. Align in this stage, start. Ah, right, so now it's flush to its button. Now it tries to go a bit to the end. And center is kind of the default, but of course now it's like more centered. Now that it has more space. Which I believe looks to be the default as well. So that again, I said start, it will be flush on the start, and I guess now that we have more space, it will be flush on the end. Yeah. So interesting, those things like alignment stuff and maybe even transition stuff are easier to do when you're working with libraries like this, because people have wanted them, so they've implemented the code for you. Cool. I think that may be it for today. I will talk a little bit about the libraries again. I do think it's superbly important to know the fundamentals, the HTML fundamentals. Whenever new HTML standards drop, you should make an effort to read about them and see what you can do with them. One of the most exciting things this year has been this, the Popover API, with just like 2 lines of code, Popover and popovertarget. You can get a nice boring popover to work for you, especially when you're trying to do the subscribe to my newsletter or ads stuff. Like use this coupon code before you leave. Like this is exactly what you want. And it's going to take you 2 lines of code and then you take the rest of the day off. No need to bring in a different library, no need to do anything, just do this. If you want to use this to make something a bit fancier, like nested menus and stuff, also possible, but then you do go into the position where you do need to do some of the code yourself. However, if it's using HTML standards, then you can take this knowledge into your React projects, into your Svelte projects, into your Vue projects, into anything. So it's important to be able to transfer the knowledge across the frameworks and not need to know that, oh, for React, I use like this Tanstack library thing. For Svelte, I use Shadcn Svelte and whatever else. Knowing how to do it, adhering to standards will future-proof it on how you do it in the future. Sometimes we don't get the standards right in the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript world. So for accordions, for example, people really want the accordions to animate, and that's impossible to do with real accordions. So people don't use it. But hey, when you can, try to do the native stuff. And you will need some code for yourself at some point if you are looking for something more complicated, so to not eyeball where to spawn the popover, not exactly at the middle of the screen, but somewhere relative to the component that triggers it. That's where you may want to look into libraries. So especially if you are using Shadcn already, why not use the Shadcn popover? The problem comes when you don't have Shadcn on this project, you have a different component library, it doesn't have a popover implementation there. Should you bring in Beats UI or something similar that does have a popover implementation? Will you need to pass it through someone that will review your new dependency or whatever? That's when it gets more complicated. But for the most common use cases, the standard for the Popover API is really good. I'm really happy with it, excited that it's here. Final demo. And feel free to ask more questions, because it looks like will be done quickly this time. Easy breezy. All right, so we've shown quite a few ways to do the vanilla HTML popover. All you need is the popover attribute, which does default to auto, so all you really need is this. An ID, which you could always give IDs to your elements. Any element can be a popover, doesn't need to be a div, but div is like the classic one, can't beat the classics. But this can be anything, can be like a side, can be span, can be section, can be whatever you want. Doesn't matter. But to toggle it on and off, you need a button with a popover target or an input with a popover target. So only buttons and inputs. This cannot be a div, this cannot be like a list item or anything too clever. This needs to be a button or an input. The popover target should be the ID of your popover, the thing that has the popover attribute. And then you get the most common use case covered. So on this one, it's the same thing, but we've extracted it into a reusable Svelte component. But it really just has the popover attribute. And this is a regular button that has a popover target. And the default functionality is what you really want, which is renders the popover in the middle of the screen saying, subscribe to my newsletter. if the user gets annoyed and clicks outside of it, it gets dismissed. If they click escape, if they do any sort of action in their device that is like the escape cancel action, it will cancel it, which is great. If they try to interact inside, then it stays on. Perfect, that's what we want. But there are some use cases that you can adhere to. The button can be the automatically toggle to show, toggle disappear, which is what we've been using in the other examples, but can also be a dedicated button that will only show it, no matter how many times you click it, or a dedicated button that will always hide it, no matter how many times you click it. It will not try to do the other thing, it will not toggle. You can style the popover, of course, but you can also style a pseudo element that gets created. HTML elements have pseudo elements like before and after are things that you could have used. Popovers have a backdrop pseudo element, and you can style this commonly to do this blur effect, to give more focus into your popover, to give it like the sepia tone, to do things like that. So this is the backdrop element that we're styling here. We're finding by ID the popover that we want to style the backdrop of, and we apply a backdrop filter is what we did here. And it looks nice. And like a few lines of code, you've got the backdrop of your dreams. We even did it for this like drop down backdrop, like insane effect. You wouldn't actually want to use this. If a user dares to click on one of your navigation menus to bring up sub navigation, then you're like, you need to select something from here. I think that's intense. So you can eyeball and do something like this, attach the popover by finagling with its CSS. But as always, keep an eye out for libraries as well, especially if you have something like Shadcn, which is the type of library I like nowadays, a copy and paste library, so you can adapt it to your exact needs. You don't need to upgrade dependencies when it gets updated and whatnot. You just need to update your own code as you please. We did a transition to Svelte fine, just fine, for example. Align, say like this one. This can cover quite a few use cases as well, especially the one where you want the popover to be somewhere exactly in relation to a dynamic element. So in the header, we always know how big our header is going to be. We can calculate this. You can do like clever code to actually understand where exactly in the screen this element that toggles the popover is. But if you want it, if you want the popover to be related to that element, you need to do a bit more clever code, like by binding this of the popover element, so you can see where, so you can add some styles to it. By binding this to the triggering button element, so you can see where it's rendered on the screen, and then adding some offset styles to your popover. It's starting to get complicated, which is why you can use a library like Shadcn, which takes care of those things for you. Some nice default use cases like have this be flush to the button and whatnot. What happens if there isn't enough screen? Like, it has like so many properties for things that I'm sure people have asked for, which is why there are like components now. That many libraries now that have these properties. You can style it and animate it quite easily. So at that point, you may want to consider using a library. I do think for the most common use cases, just do this, you're done, 2 lines of code, take the rest of the day off. And if you have Shadcn, you can still keep using this. But keep in mind, in projects that don't have it, new projects, keep in mind of this new HTML API that dropped just a few months ago, has browser support everywhere, so don't worry about it. In evergreen browsers, it works. I think that's it for today. Let me know what you'd like to see next. We're renewing our appointments for Tuesday. Quick one today. Last 2 streams were game dev. Check out the game that I submitted for the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam. Just a version of Snake that people are saying the controls are smooth, they're nice, which makes me very happy. It's a very simple game. The next one I make is going to be more complicated. So you want more Svelte, you want more AI and LLMs, these things are coming. Keep suggesting stuff. I'm still working on a video on Pocket Base and starting to work with SvelteKit as a CMS. delivering a CMS to a client. I think that's a very valid use case that I've been doing and people have been asking for. So I want to show more stuff about this, but I'm very slow at editing. Regardless, let me know if that's what you want to see more of. Let me know what you want to see more of instead. Or maybe my secret hopes are, it's like focus on game dev. You'll make a good game one day. Johnny, you don't need to wait for Game Maker's Toolkit 2025. Especially the summer feels like the time for like games and pleasure. It's so hot, the sun is out all day. You have so much sunlight. It feels like it's gaming time. But we'll see. Pocket-based stuff really excites me, so we'll be getting into that further. I think this is gonna be it for today. Maybe I should have timed this stream to finish in 1 hour 23 minutes, because 1 to 3, like, will we ever get to a sequential number? I will remember it if we do. If we do get to stream 1234, I will remember it. It's possible. It's possible. All right. I think this is gonna be it for today. Thanks again, everyone, for watching, spending a bit of your time with me, especially people in the chat not getting mad today. Thank you very much for dropping by. I'll see you around. Have lovely, lovely weekends.